Take a deep breath. I'm Michelle Granberg. Welcome to Positive Energy. Many people say that life is essentially a spiritual journey and that everything that happens is for the purpose of spiritual awakening. In other words, awakening to our true self or our true nature. My guest, David Newman, is a renowned sacred chant master, recording artist, singer, songwriter, author, and inspirational teacher. He's going to share his personal story with the power of spiritual awakening. So, David, welcome to Positive Energy.
Thanks, Michelle.
Can you feel the positive energy?
Of course, yeah.
You brought some of it with you.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Well, I'm really pleased to have you here in Positive Energy. And, my aim on this show is really to inspire people to look at their lives differently through a spiritual lens, through a broader lens and a spiritual lens. And, your book, The Time-Bound Traveler, has a lot in it in terms of, I think, universal themes, a lot of which we all experience, or it's the universality of the human journey, which is also the spiritual journey.
Sure.
So there's a lot to cover in there, but I was hoping we could talk about some of the highlights from your book. So maybe you could start by sort of taking us back to that first sort of crucial moment, that lightning bolt moment.
Sure.
Would you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I had been someone who had been on a spiritual path for a long time. As I mentioned on the book, I started meditating as a young child.
Right.
And I felt like everything led up to that moment. I had read about in spiritual books and even sung about as a spiritual music artist, this notion of oneness or connectedness. And yet, I woke up, it was in early November 2010, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I had what I call in the book a lightning bolt experience, where I perceived everything except for myself as the center, perceiving everything. There was only it, and essentially no me. So I had a clear realization of the oneness of everything, and it was simultaneously breathtaking but also terrifying as well, which is kind of what I wrote about in the book, to bring that to light.
Yeah, a lot of it was that you just didn't know what was happening.
At
that exact moment, it wasn't. It's now in hindsight that you understand it.
Yeah.
Through furthering your journey.
As I wrote in the book, it took me 3 years to integrate or relax into that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like you were sitting around during that time.
No, I was not. I was trying to make sense of what had happened. There was something in me that was at ease with it, because ultimately the discovery was that spaciousness, that connectedness, that non-separation is my natural state.
Yes.
But the separative way of perceiving was so ingrained within me that there was a holding on pattern that I had to work through.
So the sort of subtitle to your book is How My Journey as a Seeker Came to an End.
Yeah.
That's a great, captivating subtitle. So talk a little bit.
I figured so when I wrote it. It was
smart.
Well, it was true. It is true.
Yes.
And so in addition to being true, I knew that it would be provocative for people, and that was important to me. Because one of the symptoms of the ultimate realization that came forward 3 years after that lightning bolt experience was that I stopped looking for what already is.
Right.
The search came to an end.
Well, a lot of people consider themselves seekers. We really are perpetual seekers, in that way. So it's interesting. Now you're saying that we are what we're seeking. We are that which we seek in some ways as well. And you talk about letting go in the book. So talk a little bit about what that's like for you and for people.
Well, before that came forward in my life, what I described as the lightning bolt, I had never questioned my status as a spiritual seeker. I was a spiritual seeker. I was looking for something. When I saw that the thing I was looking for was the thing that was looking, not as a concept or an ideology or something theoretical, but when I saw that and ultimately realized that, the impulse to seek fell away. And it was, I would say it was one of the significant symptoms of my awakening, was the impulse to look for that which is always here, no longer existed. And all my questions of being a spiritual seeker fell away as well. They didn't get answered. Essentially, they became irrelevant at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
So the questions changed, or the questions became irrelevant in that way.
Exactly. The distinction that I draw in the book is there still is a person obviously having a journey, evolving and growing and learning.
Right.
It's just that the impulse to seek as it was before is not there.
So what about the concept of enlightenment? Has that changed for you, the concept, and is there some misconception around that?
Well, again, one of the things that changed was a lot of speculation in the conceptual realm. My mind doesn't tend to go there. So it's hard to give what took place in my awareness a name. Perhaps you could call it awakening, you could call it enlightenment, you could call it whatever you want.
Words fall short
They
It's
do.
not about that.
They do. And when I speak about it and I'm teaching, what I try to do is describe the nature of the awareness itself, or the shift that took place, rather than giving it a name. Certainly, I don't go around saying, "Hey, I'm enlightened," because in reality, no one ever gets enlightened. Something falls away, and that which is always present reveals itself. But it's also seen to have always been that way. So it doesn't. The beauty and the elegance and the simplicity of what I discuss is that nothing really changes. It's just kind of a false sensibility falls away, because the lenses that were maintaining an idea called separation come off.
Yeah, this false sense of self, this false identity. In other words, sometimes we hear it said, we're not our thoughts, we're not our bodies.
Right.
Well, those are experiences that we have here as humans, but not to identify with those so much, that there is something, we're something much more than that.
Exactly.
So how do you make that, when you teach people, when you're with people, when you're discussing this, how do you make that practical for people? Is there a way to give people who are listening now an example of what, not what they can do to awaken, but what they can do when they get caught up in their thoughts, or when they get caught up in that identity and the drama, of the day-to-day?
Well, step back and look with neutrality, without judgment. The realization that came forward for me as that transition expressed itself was that as things aren't happening to me, and I'm not doing them. So this whole this life has an intelligence to it, and I'm not in charge. So that's for me an important thing to impress.
That's because I'm in charge.
That's because you're well, of course. That's an important thing for me to impress
upon.
My
show. I'm in charge. No, I'm just kidding.
At least for 20 minutes. See what happens when you get in the car.
I live in that false belief right now.
Yeah. So it's not that you were in charge and now you're not in charge. We've never been in charge. It would be like walking and believing that you could wrap your arms around the ocean. Consciousness, life, intelligence, awareness, spirit, whatever name you want to give to it, is vast and has kind of an ultimate intelligence. So just not to get in its way. The twist is that once your awareness retracts back into itself, you are not separate from what I was just describing. It's just that little me that believes it's separate and in charge. That's really becomes the issue, is breaking down that false belief.
It's a big one. It's a big aha moment, for many people, just at least intellectually have that understanding that we can step back, that we're part of something greater, this unified field of intelligence that we're showing up in some form, that it's not just about the small self.
Exactly.
In that way.
For me, it was always about sort of keeping the small self in check. And ultimately, the realization was that there is no small self.
Yeah.
There's only self. Yeah.
So I guess we could say, don't sweat the small stuff.
Or the big stuff.
Or the big stuff.
Or anything in between.
That's our message.
That's the message.
Spiritual,
Don't sweat.
Just don't sweat.
Unless you're at the gym.
Then it's important to sweat.
Or practicing hot yoga, then you have no choice.
You talk about a lot of spiritual teachers in your book.
Yeah.
Some I had heard of, some I hadn't, some living, some no longer in their bodies. I would love for you to touch on maybe just a couple of those right now. Maybe Neem Karoli Baba.
Sure.
and someone else that you'd like to mention. So tell us about them and how they influenced you. They were so important on your path.
Yeah, in a very significant way, Neem Karoli Baba is a great Indian saint who is known as a guru of bhakti, or unconditional love. And he left his body. In Sanskrit, they call it Mahasamadhi, the Great Liberation, in the early 70s. I was born in 1963, so I was 9 when he left. So I didn't get a chance to meet him in person, but he became an important part of my life, met me, I guess you could say, in the inner worlds, and became a guide for me and led me into the practice of devotional love and devotional chanting as well, bhakti yoga and kirtan. So a big instrumental force and presence in my life, one of those undefinable, mysterious connections that isn't of this life, but yet deeply influenced my life.
Shows that it's just one life.
Yeah.
There's no real here and there.
Yeah, exactly. And then after November 2010, when I had that non-separative moment, I really didn't have a language for what I call the path of no self, which was really what had been revealed to me, was the absence of a self. And so I was led to different teachers. It was really a graceful journey for me, because when I was on tour, right after that had happened, I met a man in North Carolina named Bart Marshall, who became a great mentor to me. Yes. And along that journey, in the 3 years between the lightning bolt and the awakening, I met a series of different teachers who came along, and they all had one thing in common, and that was to help guide me through this awakening and also make themselves obsolete. Right. Which they ultimately did, because in the end, the message that they were sharing became redundant for me. And that's I believe that spiritual teachers and gurus and mentors and guides are very important, but at some point, when you get it, then it's time for you to share it. And
a lot of people get stuck in the messenger versus the message.
Yeah, exactly.
I think with teachers and gurus.
Mm-hmm.
So,
at some point, it's time to leave home and go out on your own.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you don't tap in or touch base or stay connected, but you no longer are leaning into those beings. You've become strong within yourself, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Yeah, and truth is truth. So I guess we must all have access to that same. Wisdom is wisdom, can come through us as well.
Great gurus or teachers are always trying to make you like them. They're not being humble, they're just giving you the truth, and that is that whatever is inside of them is also inside of you. And at some point, you just have to be courageous and willing enough to receive it and take it in. Cool. And acknowledge that.
So it's beautiful. We honor those teachers, certainly all of them.
Very much so. Just to get back to the practical guidance you asked me about, I was just something came in and I wanted to go a little bit of a full circle with, and that is when people ask me what's the best way to meditate, my answer is whatever fosters a sense of your own absence. Yeah. I'm a musician, so in those moments when I'm playing music and suddenly David's not there anymore, or whether you like to cook and you're not there anymore, or walk or run or whatever activity it is that brings you into that space of dissolving into the whole, that's the form of meditation that I recommend for people.
It reminds me, I love that quote that Krishna Das uses when he asked Neem Karoli Baba, how did Jesus meditate?
Yeah.
Or somebody asked him that, and the answer was...
They said how to meditate, how to meditate.
How does one meditate? And he, I think, sat in silence for a moment and just said, he got lost in love.
Yeah, he said meditate like Jesus.
Meditate like Jesus.
He lost himself in love.
He lost himself in love.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're going to stop for a moment because you're going to play us a song.
Wow.
What song are you going to play us today? Just tell us a bit about that.
I'm actually, in a sense, debuting a song that was recorded for my new CD, which will be released in the next few months.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a CD that I did with members of Paul Simon's band, Bakiti Kumalo and Jamie Haddad, and I'm in the process of making a video for it now, and it's really about this global transformation, and it's called Shift.
So the name of the song is Shift.
Shift.
So here is David Newman playing us the song Shift. Enjoy.
Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamudachyate, Purnamida. I feel a shift from fear to love. The dream that we've dreamed of. A shift from suffering to joy. In a world we won't destroy. Shift in perspective in the collective. Shift in consciousness. Shift in direction and in perception. Do you feel like this? I feel a shift. I feel a shift. I feel a shift from division and greed to caring for all those in need. A shift from destruction and war to a peace that will endure. Shift in perspective in the collective. Shift in consciousness. Shift in direction and in perception. Do you feel like this? I feel a shift. I feel a shift. I feel a shift from injustice and lies to a conscience that won't compromise. A shift from the shackles that bind to freedom for all mankind. Shift in perspective in the collective. Shift in consciousness. Shift in direction and in perception. Do you feel like this? I feel a shift. I feel a shift. Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. I feel a shift.
So, David, I would like to talk a little bit more about, I would like to talk about Sanskrit, because I'm very curious about the language of Sanskrit, and it really resonates for me. And can you comment on, I've heard it called a vibrational language. I don't know if you've heard it called that. Can you talk a little bit about the nature of Sanskrit and sort of the nature of kirtan as well?
Sure. I'll start with Sanskrit.
Please.
It is, an ancient language which is said to have been revealed by the great sages and rishis of India. And it was revealed to glorify and describe the divine, not as a language which was used for mundane or ordinary purposes.
Right.
It carries an incredible vibration. It's known as the language of the gods. It's been around for a long time, and it does open doors within the consciousness. So Sanskrit is often used in combination, which in phrases or aphorisms, which are called mantras. And mantra is a word which means to guide or protect the mind, into truth. There's a particular form of mantra which are called devotional mantras, which are expressing one's loving devotion for a higher power. And it's typically accompanied by music and sung in sweet melodies, and that's
in call and response.
In call and response form, and also together, and that's called kirtan. And kirtan has many definitions, but it means to praise that which is exalted. My favorite definition of kirtan.
You talk about kirtan in the book as it awakens the full spectrum of energies within us.
Sure, yeah, exactly. It calls out to different aspects or manifestations of the oneness so that a person can get in touch exactly with the full spectrum of who they are and not be afraid to express all of it. Yeah.
I also love how you talk about sort of love is the one true path in a sense.
Yeah.
And that love is sort of the present moment. It really is all that there is. So that love and acceptance and being in the present moment are really key to spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Not to seek those out, but they're already here. So say a little bit more about how you talk about saying yes to life. And that really is the awakened state when you accept life just as it is in some ways.
Yeah, falling in love with what is an easy way to say it. Each one of us has a destiny and we're being guided on a path. And just to trust that and open to it and realize even that person who's being guided on the path, that you're not even limited to being that person. You are the one that's guiding. Yeah, it's kind of like what I call waking up within the dream. When you wake up in the morning, you're not afraid because you realize that you're not the character in the dream. You're the dreamer. Yeah. So the duality of one accepting your destiny and your path, and compassionately and lovingly walking those steps. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect is, solving the case of your own mistaken identity and realizing that no matter what happens to that person, it's actually not happening to you in the end. That's the bigger picture. Yeah.
And kirtan can actually access that state within us.
For me, it did.
It does for me too. I
yeah.
feel, talk about oneness, it's one of certainly the only places where I really feel that direct connection, that oneness.
The ancient sages that brought forward the practice of devotional yoga or bhakti yoga, they knew that a person had to get their consciousness outside the limitations of their own thinking mind.
Right.
And so that's what kirtan mantras do. They take us, from here to here, and the heart has inherent wisdom in it, and a person feels much more at ease and connected to the greater whole when their awareness is residing in their heart as opposed to in their conditioned mind. Right. And that's the great, key of kirtan, is it unlocks that essential awareness of the heart.
And is there something about the repetition of doing that regularly as a practice as well, holding yourself in that state for, not that there's an amount of time, but holding that energy in that way, that each time it's sort of accumulative?
It does. It's cumulative and it builds. If you think about some of the negative patterning or conditioning of the mind, think about how many times we've heard certain things or we've seen certain images or messages. And what happens is that creates kind of a groove in the mind. And so it's kind of like reversing it and spinning.
Creating a new pattern, a new habit.
Creating a new pattern and a new habit.
New energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well that's wonderful. Any other messages that you'd like to give for people?
So many. Well, be true to yourself. It's important for me to, in particular in sharing my story, because people may read the story and say, well, how come it hasn't happened for me that way? Or why doesn't it look like that for me? Or when is that going to happen? Right. And it's very important for people, I believe, for me to share that everybody's path is unique, you know. Everyone's heading up the same mountain. It's the same mountaintop, but there are numerous paths up to the top. So just to really trust and honor the very specific and beautiful way that your path looks.
For you. That's why we're here. It's an adventure.
Unfolds for you, yeah. And it's wonderful to get guidance from another, to get inspiration from another, but ultimately, you know, the most effective place to look is within. That's really where the true answers are.
There's no pressure. It's not a race. There's no competition. Sit with yourself. Be with yourself.
Sit with yourself. Yeah, people do ask me when I talk about this awakening, they say, you know, what is the one common ingredient that can avail this to me? And my answer is always the same, and that's an earnest desire. You know, you may have lots of priorities in life. I say, if you want spiritual realization or liberation or to awaken, whatever, however you want to call it, just make that your strongest desire, and put that at the top of your priority list, and you know, just let your trajectory be in that direction.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool. So let's just talk about what you're doing these days. You're doing a lot of things. Every time I see you on social media, you're somewhere else. You do a tremendous, you are the traveler there. The time-bound traveler.
Time-bound traveler.
The time-bound traveler.
Yeah, exactly.
So anything you'd like to share about what's on your calendar?
Wow. Let's see. Well, like I mentioned, I have a new record coming out. It's going to be out in the springtime. It's called Love is Awake. And I'm making some videos and doing the artwork for that now. So that's loads of fun. I'm going to be doing lots of festivals, the Philly Chant Festival in June, lots of the other bhakti and spiritual yogic music festivals in spring and summer, and just lots of good stuff. I just came from a week in Kripalu, which is one of my favorite places, and we just found out that we're going to be there again for New Year. So we bring in the New Year there every year with a week-long program. Yeah.
So how cool is that? I wish we had more time. I'd love to hear more about how it is to be in that space with so many people all over. Wonderful. So how can people reach you?
My website.
David. What's your website?
Yeah, it is.
Do you know your website? This is a test.
DavidNewmanmusic.com.
I knew that if you hadn't noted it.
And my Facebook page, unfortunately, Facebook maxes you out personally, so I'm maxed out personally, but I do have a music fan page. Okay. And that's David Newman, a.k.a. and my spiritual name, which is Durga Das.
God.
Yeah.
So you can reach David through those vehicles, those paths. You can reach me as well, and I can put you in contact with David. My websites are relaxationandhealing.com, michellegranberg.com, and you can find Positive Energy TV show on Facebook as well. So I want to really thank David Newman for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle.
It's been a real pleasure to be here,
very
and
happy
I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah. Namaste.
Namaste. And thank you for joining us on Positive Energy.